Hello, this is Matthew Lohstroh.
And I'm GaryLeland, and you're listening to episode 110 of the Crypto Cousins podcast.
Feed your interest in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies by joining Hall of Fame podcaster GaryLeland on the Crypto Cousins podcast. And remember, we are all cousins in the world of crypto. This week's price of Bitcoin.
$10,218. That's down $419 or 4% over the last 7 days. Howdy, 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 howdy. Matthew, welcome to the show. You know, you get 4 howdies if you're from Texas. Everybody else gets 3.
That's the greeting down at Texas A&M. It's a tradition, so I like that.
Oh, I didn't know that was a tradition at A&M to say howdy.
Yep, everyone says howdy down here. So I start transferring that over to San Antonio and Dallas, and I get a couple weird looks.
Yeah, I get some weird, I think, comments from people or weird thoughts from people who I interview from up north when I give them their 3 howdies. You know,
yeah.
You're from A&M. My daughter went to A&M. My son-in-law went to A&M. I have an A&M shirt, so we like A&M a lot in my household. You know,
the culture in and of itself. It's an awesome university.
It is a culture into itself. I just wondered. I always wondered when y'all left and joined the Southeast Conference. How did that hamper the hatred of UT? Did that hurt the hatred any? You don't really.
Well, you know, it's fun because I mean, it kind of reiterates that they're not even on a level playing field with us anymore, where they just can't even compete. But there are some sports where we play them in terms of baseball. But it does kind of pose a problem. I mean, they're still in our fight song and whatnot, and so that's all we talk about is sawing their Longhorns off.
Yeah, I mean, when the game's over, you're singing. No matter who you play, you're singing a song about your hatred of UT. So.
Yeah. So it's sad, but I think they're going to try playing within the next 10 years in football and whatnot. So we'll see how it goes.
We need to get that going. Well, before we go any further, how about give everybody just a short minute or two rundown on who you are, your bio, basically.
Yeah. So right now I'm a student at Texas A&M. Currently been in the Bitcoin space since 2016. Was kind of in that phase where I was a little altcoiner, like everyone has been, and then came to my senses kind of early 2017. Hopped on the train, started diving real deep into it. Couple other Bitcoiners, Dan Held, Clark Moody, they are also alumni of Texas A&M. Started getting connected with them, got plugged into the space. And then most recently, Texas A&M, big oil and gas college, university down in South Texas. And we currently are starting a mining operation working with Upstream Data and using excess flared off gas that is stranded energy on oil and gas sites and using that to power mining data centers.
And that's really what we're going to talk about mostly on this show, because I found that we met at BITBLOCKBOOM. Yes. And you told me what you did, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I got to get you on the show." And so that's where the introduction was. And actually, for those listening out there, yeah, this is a kind of interesting story. I think the night before BITBLOCKBOOM, there was a dinner, and Jimmy Song was doing an auction for his book to raise money for the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute. And people just started throwing stuff in there to get that bid higher and higher. And Jimmy threw his hat in there. If you know Jimmy, he wears a cowboy hat. And which a lot of people wear a cowboy hat here. That's not that unusual. And maybe if you're from New York, you may think it's unusual when you see Jimmy. But if you live here, you don't think that much of it. But anyway, Jimmy threw his hat into the auction. And Matthew won the auction, the book, the hat. I think I threw in a T-shirt. I didn't have much in there, but everybody was throwing in stuff. And it was so funny. I thought that Saturday during the conference, you're wearing Jimmy's hat.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta get my money's worth out of it, I guess. Definitely unique. A little worn down, but I like it.
Well, I told Jimmy you look good in his hat, and he goes, "Everybody looks good in a hat, cowboy hat." He said, "Everybody looks at least 20% better in a cowboy hat." That's what Jimmy. I thought it was funny.
Yeah, I felt a little bad buying it because that was the first hat that he wore at Consensus, I think back in 2017. That's kind of where he got coined as Bitcoin Cowboy. So there's a lot of memories that he separated with that hat. But a deal's a deal, I guess. So I had to take it.
Jimmy lives in Austin, doesn't he? I was thinking you lived in the same town, but y'all live in different. Jimmy was on the show last week, so I'm kind of like running stuff together, I guess.
Yeah. I'm an hour and a half out of Austin. I go there a lot. Justin Moon's out there as well. I connect with him on that Unchained Capital. whatnot. So yeah, real close.
How'd you originally get into Bitcoin?
I just kind of read about it. Thought, hey, that's kind of neat. Started playing around with it. Made some money off of it, and started making decent amount of money off of it. I originally got in at 946, and was like, okay, now that I'm kind of getting into, I need to understand what I'm getting into. And then, like, just kind of like everyone else, you have that click. You have that aha moment where all of a sudden was like, oh my goodness, I understand it. And then it was just kind of down the rabbit hole further from there.
Do you find that, I mean, I'm just going with what happened to me. I'm not saying this in a negative content. I'm saying this as something that happened to me. When you start going down the rabbit hole, you're really pumped about it, but you really don't know all the information yet about it. But you know you're pumped about it because you know enough to go down the rabbit hole.
Yes. Yeah, that was kind of mine. And I come back from a background where both my father and my brother are extremely technical. So when I started going in, my dad originally started doing cryptography back in the 1990s. He was a cypherpunk. And I started talking to my dad about SHA-256, and he's hearing his 16, 17-year-old son talking about this. He's like, what in the world are you doing? And so it was kind of interesting from that respect, where I now can relate a lot to my brother and my father on a very technical sense, specifically in cryptography.
Yeah, that's real interesting. All of a sudden you have a family bonding moment over Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's it. I've always kind of been the more social, not that engineers aren't social, but I've been more social than my brother, my father, and more kind of business related and operations. But now this is kind of more technical track that I start going down.
Well, let's talk about the using gas flaring, I guess is what that's called. What is that? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, so natural gas is either vented or flared off when it is no longer used. Venting is the act when it is not burned. And flaring is the act of when you see those kind of massive torches next to an oil well with that big flame on top.
Yeah, let's go into that first. What are the effects? Why are there two ways to do that? And what are the effects of the two ways to do that? Because I guess the cost, it doesn't cost any more to do one than the other for the most part. It's just getting rid of gas that you're not using. So why do they burn it off sometimes and sometimes they just let it go?
Mainly the reason why you don't want to vent it is about 25 times worse for the environment in terms of carbon dioxide emissions. So really, really bad just to vent that straight methane into the environment.
Is there something really hard about flaring that they don't just say, hey, let's flare because we just want to be somewhat good to the environment?
Yeah, and so most people just at a minimum flare, and it's super easy to get a license to do that in Texas. You just need it per oil well site. And so you just hook that in, start the flare. You can do it for $10,000 to $50,000, just depending on how much capacity you need to burn. Now in Canada, that's a different story. And so what Steve with Upstream Data is doing is he is actually coming in and there's regulations. Texas is completely unregulated. Canada, there's a lot of regulations in there where you like can only vent off or flare off, vent off a certain amount per day. Past that, you need to figure out a way to get rid of your gas. And flaring up there is a lot more expensive just due to regulation.
So Upstream Data, that's the company you're working with in Canada, right?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to make sure I was on the right track here. I'm sorry. Go back to what you were saying.
The flaring up there is a lot more costly. And so he comes in as a kind of another solution set as opposed to putting in the well or venting it off to make sure they're within compliance and figuring out a way to combust the gas environmentally friendly.
So in that case, that would make mining Bitcoin with that gas actually maybe cheaper or more cost effective because it's so expensive to flare it there compared to here.
Oh, it's free energy that's otherwise not being used with. So you're creating kind of like a efficiency in the fact that you're using otherwise just wasted energy and powering that. Past that, it's just kind of like your operating costs in terms of maintaining the generator, the natural gas generator, which has input natural gas output electricity.
Okay, so just so everybody, to make sure everybody knows where we're at here. Basically, if I'm right, Matt, we're talking about bringing in maybe a container with miners in it, and using that extra gas that would either be thrown into the atmosphere or flared, and using that to run a generator, I guess, and then that would power all the Bitcoin miners in the container?
Yeah, like a shipping container is kind of the norm, 20-foot C-can shipping container.
How many ASIC miners fit in there approximately? How many can you run, I guess, is what I'm trying to figure out off that one mine, off that one well?
Yeah, so it depends what your how many kilowatts you want to hook up to it and how big of a... I mean, right now, Steve's doing a prototype for a 1 megawatt center. Right now, he has a prototype. Well, he's selling a 125 kW kilowatt our shipping container, which fits approximately 94, 95 S9s in there.
And that's all running off of wasted gas.
And a minute amount of wasted gas. Most gas wells could easily power a 1 megawatt data center. I mean, that's only 300 MCF or 300 units of gas.
So is the concept on this that people who own oil wells will throw those up there, or people who own containers will go pay to get excess gas to run their containers?
The kind of goal is to just find a way to untapped revenue streams for oil sites. So we kind of come in and say, hey, this is just kind of wasted energy. We have a shorter payout period time. The norm for the oil and gas industry is about 2 years minimum. And so we kind of come in for a project, say, hey, instead of spending $3 million on a new well, how about you spend $250,000 on this small R&D project? Payout periods 12 to 15 months in a bear market, could be as little as 1 to 3 months in a bull market. You kind of have a new exposure. This has very little operating costs. It's something you know. And then past that, you don't need to know the technical part. Just assume this is a data center generating you streams of revenue.
So now you can realistically say Bitcoin is no longer using the energy of a small city or a small country and destroying the environment. Bitcoin is helping the environment, right?
Oh, yeah. It's saving the environment. Bitcoin's saving the world. You're going in, you're finding ways to kind of stop literal flames burning off into the environment, as well as venting off, which is 25 times worse, and creating a whole new industry. So not only is Bitcoin saving the environment, it's creating economic growth and a whole new industry within oil and gas.
Now, you know this a lot better than I find this interesting, but I don't necessarily know a ton of the questions to ask because I'm not that familiar with the process. What are some of the things about this, because you've been working with this for a while, that you really think are interesting or found amazing, or just information that you think in general people would want to know? I'm going to let you kind of like take the lead here on this.
Yeah, I think one of the big things to take into account that we've been looking into is weather conditions. So East Texas is going to be a lot different than Central Texas in the fact that you have humidity on the Gulf. And East Texas, you just kind of have a lot of dust. So these shipping containers, they have massive kind of 1 horsepower fans that just suck in air and push it through, just massive amounts of cubic feet per minute of air. And so in that, you kind of have to take into account making sure you have good heat transfer, as well as you're not pulling in too much dust to mess with the system. And then you take into account humidity. So that is a big issue, but you also don't want to have complete closed systems with AC units, because you want to have extremely low capital costs. So that is kind of just the pendulum of efficiency versus capital costs that we've been weighing, trying to get into that right.
But you're up in Canada or something, though. That must be really good compared to what you're doing here in Texas, then, because you're just opening the doors and venting into cool air. Here, it's 100 degrees right now. You're not venting in any. That might be cooler than the ASIC miner is, but you're not really cooling it off that much.
Exactly, yeah. So the ASIC miners, I mean, we have to keep those below 100 degrees Celsius, and the ambient temperature, we have to keep that below 40 degrees Celsius. Canada, they actually have the opposite problem. They put the generators inside the shipping container and use that to preheat the air so you don't have a cold start on your ASIC miners. It's actually a pretty interesting concept of the engineering on that.
So they actually have to warm the ASIC miners up.
Yep. So they don't have a cold start in like negative 50 degrees. If for whatever reason they shut off. But these data centers, we can control these completely remotely, middle of nowhere, just off. We use cellular modem just to get a little bit of cell signal. Need 300 megabytes a day of data, and use that to completely control everything remotely. And then we have the foreman on site at these oil sites controlling oil changes, air filters.
Right, because they were already there running the rig.
Yeah, and this is an oil site generator. This is what they're used to, and they know how to do it. So very low operating costs that I can do managing the finances on my computer.
And it's all wireless, I guess. I mean, we're not laying any lines or anything as far as the internet connections and things like that.
Yeah, nope. It's just cellular modem with a antenna on top.
So how does your cost compare, or how can it be cost effective to do it here in Texas with it as hot as it is?
Right now, it's kind of still, it's working in Texas. So there's one in Central Texas, and then we're going to be the second ones out in East Texas. In the summer, you're going to need to underclock them. But just even with the amount of air you're pulling through there for ventilating it, you're still able to run the miners. We've been getting right now about 85 degrees C and the heat of the day. And then we've been getting 77 at the 73 is the lowest we've got at night, just in terms of temperature. So we're still able to control it pretty well during the heat.
What is the thought process on what's going to eventually happen if this is as successful as it seems to be going? Well, someday, do you think that'll be like a no-brainer? People are going, we're putting in a new well. Make sure you order one of those containers, because we're putting in a well, and they just go, hey, I'm not putting a well in without a container. That would just be stupid.
What's interesting is the first thing when I called it this company, Texas A&M Aggies, and I said, I can get you gas. I can sell your natural gas that you wouldn't be able to sell otherwise. You're just burning off in the environment. But if you could sell it on the market, they could sell it on the market for about $2. I can sell your natural gas, which you can't even sell, for $10 a unit right now, 5 times the market price. And so you kind of create this almost economic competition where you could put one of these data centers on a site, and if everyone's doing it, you almost kind of have this, okay, we're hooked up to a pipeline to be able to sell the gas, but we're going to sell it. We're going to burn it to the Bitcoin network, or we're going to sell it to the pipeline, whichever is more efficient. So I think in the future, this is really actually going to hit the natural gas market because it's kind of bottomed out and become useless because it's so hard to move and lots of capital intensive to build up pipelines to the Permian Basin, which is kind of the biggest oil field in Texas where they're doing all the fracking. And so I think this is really kind of going to affect the future. And subsequently, all the cheap energy in the world is going to go to the Bitcoin network. And whether you like Bitcoin or not, it's going to affect you because your electricity prices are going to go up because everyone's going to be using the cheap electricity, sourcing it at the source for the Bitcoin network.
I got 2 questions here from Patrick.
Yep.
And I'm going to read these to you real quick. My central question is, generating power with the additional expenses economically superior to buying power at current BTC price? I know there are a lot of variables that are moving simultaneously, and understand precision is difficult. I guess the main thing is generating power with the additional expense economically superior to buying power at the current BTC price.
Well, in terms of gas, absolutely. Generating power from what sources? From coal, like natural gas?
I'm sure he's talking about the natural gas because he knew that I was talking to you about natural gas. So I guess that's what he's saying. With the current price of BTC, is it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Economically incentive. I mean, in this instance, this gas would be used for nothing else. So the gas in and of itself is worthless because they have no means to sell it.
And the second question he has, is there a difference in environmental impact between flaring and burning the gas in a genset? Well, I think we just covered that.
So, well, venting is far worse than flaring. Flaring is better. But I think he's asking the difference between a generator and flaring. Generator, I believe, is marginally better for the environment because you're kind of combusting it in a more efficient way as opposed to just an inefficient open flame in the environment. I can't tell you the specifics on that.
Okay. Well, I wanted to make sure I got his questions in there. So even though it may have been out of place, I knew I had that covered because I thought I might have asked your questions there. So y'all just had this going in Canada, and now you're doing some in Texas. Is that it?
Yes, that is correct. So just to be clear, I am not, I'm working with Steve. We are a customer of Steve, working with him. I am not an employee of Upstream Data.
Right. Yeah, I knew that. And I should have said it. Thanks for making that clear. You're just the most person who knows the most about it that I know, I guess, basically, is what we're seeing here. What else about this is people going to find real interesting?
China right now owns 70% of the hash rate, whatnot, which is a little bit of skewed statistic because they don't really. I mine on Slush Pool and I direct that to there, but people say, oh, well, because Slush Pool and BTC Pool that's combined together that has the majority of the hash rate, which it really doesn't, because if Slush Pool does something as a bad actor, I'm going to pull my hash rate out of that and maybe redirect that to somewhere else. However, China right now, 70% of the hash rate, and they're running on 4 to 5 cents per kilowatt hour on subsidized government energy in a third world country. And so we see a lot of centralized mining. When mining becomes centralized, you become susceptible to environmental issues. So every now and then on Twitter, you'll see a flood come through and just decimate an area and whatnot, or stuff of that sort. So you kind of have these other issues you got to come into the fact where, like, hey, when you get really centralized and when you achieve economic efficiency just on a large scale, that's great, but you have a lot of stuff where you have to worry about that centralization. So when you kind of come into this place, you have a lot of you're kind of decentralizing the mining across lots of sites between lots of different oil fields and lots of different companies. And also, you're not in a third world country. You're not on subsidized government energy. I think that's very good for the ecosystem where you have this, hey, free energy sitting around. This is kind of the Oklahoma rush. Come get it. And I think that's going to be really healthy for the Bitcoin network hash rate and just kind of overall stability.
Sounds good. And for those listening, I want to make sure you know that you can go to upstreamdata.ca and you can, if actually to click on the products, there they are.
Yeah, right there. They have two right now. They have a mini and then they have a regular shipping container.
Yeah, the mini looks like an air conditioner outside of your house. I don't know how big that is.
It's a 4x4 foot cube.
And then you have the container, and then they have something that's a mega data center. I don't even know what that is.
Yeah,
that's coming soon. What have you seen both of these, the mini running and the combo?
I have not seen the mini running. I actually went up to Canada, met with Steve, and I've been on the oil sites, seen him. It is really cool. He divides it about probably 30% of the unit is dedicated to the kind of control system where you have all the miners in place, and then 70% is kind of where the generator is actually inside there, used to heat it up and whatnot. And then you kind of have this whole wall, probably 7-8 feet high, of S9 miners, and then on both sides you have kind of the technical control panels, VFDs, fans for air circulation, PLC control panel for remote in, and cellular modem, which is on the outside, Etherneted into the unit, and then a couple more. But he has this whole thing set up where you can use PDUs and have remote breakers to individually and remotely on my phone or computer turn off each miner should something go wrong, so you don't have to have the engine downtime and whatnot. So these things are just so cool.
Are these things, are these hard to hook up? Is there a lot of process on hooking one of these up to a well?
Not necessarily. So these are designed, Steve was a oil man before he was a Bitcoin guy. So he understands oil and gas inside and out. And so the only process that is needed is kind of tying it into the pipeline on site for the generator. That's all that needs to be done. And that's a very simple process that any foreman can do that on site. And then past that, it's kind of electrical input for the data center. And
you can even just host your machines with them, huh?
Yeah, he's doing 5 cents a kilowatt hour on hosting.
Yeah.
So he has that up and running in Canada, jump-starting operations. That's not something we're going to be doing. We're just going to be doing these on-site, oil site to oil site. Say, hey, come in and save a lot of money and find a stream of untapped revenue. And we have a way better payback period. And oil and gas is extremely capital intensive. A mini is going to cost you $50,000 all in. And 2 weeks ago, the same company that's buying it replaced the pipe for $50,000.
Oh, so it's a minor cost to them with the
it's insignificant. Yeah, they'll spend $3 million on a well to drill it for oil, and turns out it's a bust. So this is pocket change to them.
Well, gosh, I would just think this would be. So are we in like the experimental stage on these still, or are these actually starting to be sold? Do you know?
They're being sold. I'd say it's still somewhat experimental in terms of efficiency and making sure it's as low capex as possible. And then also kind of the business aspect. Do we go in and do we put, because these are meant to be extremely portable, both the mini and the shipping container. So it's kind of a question of, do we go in, do we put 5 shipping containers on site, kind of portable, and then if the gas has low potency or runs out, so we can move them to another site, or do we go all in? Do we put a 1 megawatt data center on site, which is kind of immovable and takes a lot of capital costs on that? And so I think there's a lot of unanswered questions in terms of how the correct business model of how to do this. And that's kind of where we're trying to figure out the right business model.
But this could move pretty quickly, though.
Yeah, but the megawatt center, not so much. 1 megawatt is going to take about 315 MCF, or 315 units of gas a day. That right now, that'd be about $600 worth of gas, maybe $650. That megawatt center would probably be $600,000 all in and produce 10 Bitcoin per month right now at this current hash rate. So, I mean, that's a behemoth. I mean, you're talking $250,000 just to buy the generator to power that thing.
Right.
But then you go, well, hey, payback period is like 11 months on that.
That's in this market too.
Yeah, in this market. So, like, I mean, Bitcoin goes to $100,000. You're making, I mean, like, you're just making a ridiculous amount of money on that if Bitcoin moons.
Hell, if it just goes to $20,000, you're still going to do good.
Yeah, I mean, if Bitcoin goes to $100,000, I mean, everyone and their mother and dog is going to be plugging a miner into their wall because it'll be profitable. I mean, the hash rate just can't keep up with the infrastructure.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. You sometimes hear people hypothetically talking about a 51% attack. You know, I was explaining to someone Bitcoin the other night, and I was having to explain a 51% attack. And why, if someone did spend all that money, they probably wouldn't want to destroy Bitcoin because they'd have so much of it.
Yeah.
You know, that they wouldn't want to ruin the money that they had. But now, if these things get in place everywhere, that 51% attack is going to really have to be a big attack.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's just increasing the size.
Yeah, I think Nick Carter on Twitter, he put out a kind of some metrics on this, but a big misconception is it's not 51% attack just at once. It's a 51% attack for a long period of time.
Right. It's not just like hitting 51 and backing off.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so I think it's like he had another metric up there of like how long you need to do that 51% attack. And I think when I read that was like 236 days.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize it was that long.
Yeah, it's ridiculously long. And then you need a ridiculous amount of capital costs. And then you need a ridiculous amount of energy sources. At that point, when you implement the game theory, you could be way richer just making all that money by mining Bitcoin yourself.
Yeah, now you've got all the Bitcoin that you acquired while trying to do your 51% attack, and you're getting ready to make that worthless.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, the only bad actor that would be incentivized to do that is someone like the United States or China.
Oh, or someone who had a lot of Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not saying Bitcoin Cash, but if you had a competing currency that you were wanting to be number one, I guess it might be good for that. I don't know.
Yeah, I can't think of anyone with that much power.
That's what I was going to say. That would be, now you have to go back to your statement as to who could do that, even if they wanted to, and it has to be United States or China probably, or maybe the two of them together. And
another thing of you come in with government regulations and a government ban or whatnot of Bitcoin. I mean, it's a lot harder to run sanctions on decentralized kind of mining. You have that on every single mining oil site. You can't keep track of that in the middle of nowhere with like very little cell signal. When you kind of have in China where they have these massive I mean, we've all seen pictures of these on the internet. That's a lot easier to subdue than across the entire state of Texas, just kind of dotted out.
Well, there's a lot of those in the United States too, though.
Yes.
Big farms, like that you could, but you'd probably go after all the exchanges. If people couldn't get their money off exchanges or sell their Bitcoin easily, that probably
it'd be better to make it a liquidity crisis than it would mining. Yeah. People often kind of have a misconception of like, oh, mining it's too complicated, or it's too capital intensive, or I don't know what I'm doing, and that's no reason to. It's not that complicated, and there's no reason to not get interested in it. I mean, go buy an S9. It's $350 on eBay. Start tinkering around, seeing if you can create some new innovation on that. I mean, Bitcoin is going to reform the world in terms of energy, and people are going to be economically incentivized to find the cheapest sources of energy possible. I mean, I know people that are running liquid cooled farms in the middle of nowhere in Arizona, just going off solar energy. And so they're going to have like literally no operating costs for the rest of the time and always be able to be profitable because they'll always have free energy just off the sun. So I think there's always innovation to be had. And I don't think the technicalities or the capital costs should be a hindrance of even just researching it out of your own interests or possibility of getting into it. I think mining is one of the easiest ways to get involved in the cryptocurrency space, especially if you're non-technical, can't program, or don't see yourself doing multi-sig setup, making a company like Casa Huddle.
Hey, before we go, I have a couple questions. Do you listen to podcasts at all?
I do.
What are your favorite podcasts, crypto podcasts?
Probably Tales from the Crypt. And I love Meltem and Jill Carlson's What Grinds My Gears. I love them. I think they're a lot of fun. Just listening to them banter back and forth.
And what wallet do you like?
I've been a very big fan of Casa's multi-sig Keymaster. So I bought into that. And then also I've been playing around with the ColdCard. That's a lot of fun too. So ColdCard as well as Opendime's. Opendime's Cypherpunk's Dream. Those are kind of like my top 3, I'd say right now.
And where can people follow you at?
Yeah, on Twitter, I'm at Lohstroh. So it's Lohstroh, one word, at Lohstroh.
Anything else before we get out of here you want to leave everybody with? That I might have failed to ask you that you wanted to get out there?
Dollar cost averaging to Bitcoin. $10 a day, $10 a week, $10 a month, whatever you can afford. Just kind of get that on purchase and don't think about it.
Yeah, I saw a thing a long time ago that if you'd bought Bitcoin when it was 19,000, maybe I saw it when Bitcoin was 6,000, that if you'd have bought it at 19,000 and kept dollar cost averaging until it was 6,000 again, you would be up. Even though you'd started at $19,000.
Oh yeah, I think I saw the same thing. It was if you started buying Bitcoin at its all-time high of like 19.9 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And you bought $10 a day every day until like March or April 2019, you'd still be up 300%.
Yeah. And even though it had dropped all the way down to 3,900 or something at that point, you still would be up. So, but because I guess it wasn't up that high that long is the main issue. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Thanks for hosting BitBlockBOOM, and
thanks for coming, and thanks for taking Jimmy's hat. So I could give him a hard time about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll see you there next year.
Absolutely. Yep. I'll be there next year.
And before we go, I do want to tell everybody that I am trying to get my Casa node up and get some channels going for that. So if you have a node that you want to hook into me or open a channel to me, open it up to the Crypto Cousins, just Crypto Cousins, and I'll open a channel back. Trying to get that thing going there. So I'm just telling people to open a channel up to me. So that's the way you do it there, is you just tell people what you want. That's what I've learned in life. So everybody, before we get out of here, thanks again for joining us. And thanks again, Mike, for joining me. And everyone, have a good weekend. We'll see you next week. I hope you enjoyed today's show. A big thank you to all the cousins out there that are showing their support by donating, subscribing, and leaving great reviews on iTunes. All of those things help more than you realize. Now, you can subscribe almost anywhere podcasts are available by going to cryptocousin.com/subscribe. Call me with your comments or questions at 747-777-9471. Or you can email me at thecryptocousins@gmail.com, and I'll try to use these on future episodes. Please take a peek at the 4-Minute Crypto Show, which is produced every weekday and located at 4minutecrypto.com. It's the place to get your daily dose of crypto news, and it's always 4 minutes or less. And one last thing, please take a look at my new website, Crypto Crybaby. This website is for the true crypto fan and sells Bitcoin and crypto gear like t-shirts, caps, and so much more. Take a look at CryptoCrybaby.com today. Thanks again for listening. Love you guys.
Thanks for listening to the Crypto Cousins podcast. Please share the show with your friends. They can subscribe by going to cryptocousins.com/subscribe. And if you want to know more about Gary, just go to GaryLeland.com. Make sure and join Gary and all the Crypto Cousins every week for a new episode of the Crypto Cousins podcast. The Crypto Cousins podcast and the information included in the podcast are not intended as investment advice. Investing in any cryptocurrency is risky, and you should never invest more than you can afford to lose. Always seek professional advice before investing in any cryptocurrency. Please understand, you are using any and all information from the Crypto Cousins at your own risk.